entering in the single muscle fiber. This point where this is entering inside the myofibril is known as the motor end plate, and this is forming a myoneural junction or the neuromuscular junction. The part of the nerve that is axon is known as motor end plate, or this is forming the neuromuscular junction. This is synaptic cleft. The part of terminal axon is having presynaptic vesicles and the mitochondria. The convoluted part of sarcolemma around this terminal axon is known as sole plate, and the sarcoplasm inside the sarcolemma is rich in endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria. Now, when action potential is transferred from the soma or the alpha neurons in case of skeletal muscle to the terminal button, this is known as terminal button. The calcium enters inside these vesicles and there is release of acetylcholine, and the sarcolemma, that is sole plate, is having receptor specialized in the acetylcholine, receive the acetylcholine and release of ATP and other enzymes for the muscle contraction, that is the movement of actin and myosin. So how a muscle contract? This is by action potential. There is some planned movements in the cerebral cortex, then motor command from the cerebral cortex through upper motor neurons to the lower motor neurons, either in form of cranial nerve neurons or in form of the spinal nerve neurons. This command traverses the axon in form of action potential, but there is a cleft or junction which is not continuous. So here is firing of the neurotransmitter, that is acetylcholine. This acetylcholine is received by the receptor on the sole plate, then mitochondria and sarcoplasmic reticulum secreting the ATPs and other enzymes responsible for contraction, that is sliding of the actin and myosin, and a muscle contract. At the same time, in the synaptic cleft there is a enzyme known as acetylcholine esterase. This acetylcholine esterase dissolve or disintegrate the acetylcholine to stop the unwanted movements or the unwanted movements. And in case of lack of acetylcholine, I will talk about the organophosphorus poison, which is consumed by some persons to suicide, and these organophosphorus chemicals bind the acetylcholine. These organophosphorus poisons binds the acetylcholine esterase, and this binding of acetylcholine esterase is responsible for continuous firing of the acetylcholine and continuous movement of the muscle and spastic paralysis of the respiratory muscles and death. And a disease, Myasthenia Gravis, I will talk. Autoimmunity of the body is misdirected towards the acetylcholine receptors. In that case, the acetylcholine receptors are destroyed. Acetylcholine is released from the neuro button, the synaptic button. Presynaptic vesicles are secreting the acetylcholine, but there is no movement or lack of movement on the muscle. This condition is known as Myasthenia Gravis. The muscles which are acting on a single joint and bringing same movement are known as synergistic muscles. I will talk in crisp and concise manner the synergistic muscles. Doing the same action on the single joint, that is that here I will flex the elbow. This movement is carried by the biceps muscle and other flexure of the arm. This movement which is done by all this flexure group of muscles, these muscles are known as synergistic muscles. Remember, a single muscle can always pull, it can never push. So pulling is done by a single muscle and a single nerve. A single cell which is contracting is not a muscle. Muscle always contract in a group. If a single cell is contracting, it is not a muscle. We have seen in case of myofibroblast and the myoepithelial cells. So synergistic muscles are working a same movement on the same joint. The opponents or antagonist muscles. Antagonist or the opponents, when the muscles are opposing the movement of these muscles. But remember, opponents are not opponents, antagonists are not antagonists. These are the muscles which are responsible for smoothness of the movement. When I am lifting something from here like this, these movements, muscles, these are opponents or the antagonists. The active releasing of these muscles is responsible for or is mandatory for this smoothness of movement like this. When I take a cup of tea, when I putting this cup of tea on table again, this type of movement is carried by the gravity, but this is by the active lengthening of the muscles of the arm. This type of movement is known as action of paradox. When I am lifting something and when I putting this thing again, this is done by the gravity, but this is controlled by active lengthening of the flexor muscles of the arm. This is known as action of paradox. The muscles which are stabilizing the proximal joint during the movement on the distal joints. These muscles which stabilize the proximal joint are known as fixators. When the fixators are crossing multiple joints like the wrist joint, and movements are carried on these small interphalangeal and metacarpophalangeal joints, these fixators which are crossing more joints than one joint are known as synergistic muscles. These muscles which are carrying a special are the agonist muscles. So it was about the skeletal muscles. In my next general anatomy lecture, I will talk about the cardiovascular system